Hello everybody, here, let me show you something. This is an Andosha buck, alright? So here's what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is, from now on, instead of giving you guys a grade, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you an Andosha buck, alright? So for an assignment that you turn in, I give you an Andosha buck. And if you do a real good job on the assignment, I'll give you 2 Andosha bucks. And then, so that way there, what you're going to have is you're going to have an Andosha buck, right? And that's going to be great. Doesn't everybody want an Andosha buck? What? You don't want an Andosha buck? You don't think this Andosha buck has value? Alright, well, I'll tell you what. Here's how we're going to work this, right? For every assignment that you do, I'm going to give you an Andosha buck, right? If you do something for me, I'll give you an Andosha buck. You do a real good job on the assignment, I'll give you an Andosha buck. Do some extra credit, maybe I'll give you an Andosha buck, right? I'll give you these Andosha bucks, but then at the end of the quarter, what I'm going to do is you can exchange your Andosha buck for grades. All right? Now, what that means is if I'll charge you, say, 100 Andosha bucks for an A, right? Now you're going to give me 100. You give me 100 Andosha bucks if you have 100 Andosha bucks. If you don't have 100 Andosha bucks, sorry, buddy, no A. Now, do Andosha bucks have value? Yeah. This little piece of paper that I printed out on my printer, right? Now it has value. Now it has exchange value, right? Because I'm a person in authority and I said so, and I'm willing to do this, right? So if you get these Andosha bucks and you turn in some assignments and you've got these Andosha bucks and then you turn them in for a grade, you want that grade, that's something that you need, that's a resource that you need, well, now it has value. Now, and furthermore, think about what's going to end up happening as a result of this, right? Now, as a result of this, there may actually be a trade in Andosha bucks, right? Maybe you did, maybe you got 75 Andosha bucks, and that's only going to get you a C, but you need that B, right? Somebody else may have more Andosha bucks than they need, so maybe you can give them like a bag of chips, and they'll give you some Andosha bucks. Well, now that's an exchange value. Now, the Andosha buck actually has value relative to the dollar represented by that bag of chips that you purchased for $1. Now there's exchange value associated with this. And now you could maybe sell some, buy a big bag of potato chips at Costco, sell them to people, get your Andosha bucks, and turn that in for an A. So maybe you didn't necessarily do an A's level work, but I don't care. I'm just looking for the Andosha bucks and your ability to get those at that Andosha bucks. Maybe, hey, if somebody helps you with your homework, hey, I'll help you with your homework, but it's going to cost you 2 Andosha bucks, right? Now this paper has exchange value, right? It has value because somebody in authority says this has value and has defined that value in terms of real, countable figures, right? It has value. This is the basis for money and currency theory, right? So when people get worried about, hey, what the dollar? Wait a minute. If the dollar is really just nothing but paper, in fact, it's more of a fabric than it is paper, but whatever, and it's not based in gold, then obviously it has no value. No, it has value. It has value because the United States government says it has value. And it has value because international institutions that conduct trade in dollars, and they accept dollars in exchange, right? And therefore, those international institutions say this currency has value. So when my wife and I were in China, and my family and I were in China, and we were exchanging things for Chinese money, sometimes the Chinese would see that American dollar, those American dollars in our wallet, and they'd want those dollars. They'd be willing to exchange their goods oftentimes for a little bit less if they could get access to American money, because that American money still had value even though we were in China, right? So this is what makes currency a little bit weird, right? Currency and money is not as concrete and is not as easily definable as we first assume. So I want to talk in this video, talk a little bit about money and tell you a little bit about currency theory, and we'll talk a little bit about the dollar specifically, and then we'll move along, right? Now the first thing is, what are some characteristics that money has to have, right? And some of our modern computer technology is kind of altering some of this stuff. But some of the things that are important about money is, first of all, money has to be portable. It's got to be portable. One of the benefits of money is that you can put it in your pocket, as compared to like our old barter system, where, hey, if you wanted a leather satchel from the tanner down the street and you were a goat herd, well, you had to bring a goat to the tanner and exchange the goat for the leather satchel. And maybe the tanner didn't want a goat. Maybe the tanner wanted a barrel. So then you would have to take your goat to the cooper, the barrel maker, and exchange the goat for, or maybe the goat cheese, for a barrel, then take the barrel to the tanner and exchange the barrel for the leather satchel. Oh my God, right? That's a lot of work. But with dollars, with Andosha bucks, you can just fold it up, put it in your pocket, and you can move around. And when you go to the tanner, you don't have to worry about going to the cooper first and buying a barrel you don't need because the tanner needs it. You can just give the tanner the Andosha buck, and bam, you got yourself a leather satchel. You're golden, right? It's portable. Now, of course, with things like debit cards, and electronic banking and stuff like that, you don't get any more portable than being able to transmit that information across the world at the speed of light. That is about as portable as you can get. So it's one of the innovations of computer technology. Another thing is that it is durable. It is durable, right? You may have, all of you have probably had the experience where you left the money in your pants and you did laundry, and then the next day there's your dollar bill. It's all wrinkly and wet and crunkly and stuff like that, but it's still a dollar bill. It still works, right? It's durable. It lasts, right? This Andosha buck's made of paper, but it's durable to a certain extent. And maybe it's not the most efficient material to make currency out of, but it'll work in a pinch, right? And of course, again, when it comes to electronic currencies, that's about as durable as it gets, right? Unless you get a computer virus, that currency is going to be there, if only in digital form, right? Another characteristic is that it is what we call divisible. It is divisible. You can divide it up into smaller components. Now, this actually used to be a literal property of money. So when you take a look at the very first kind of global currency, the very first global currency is the peso, right? And the peso was a gold coin. It was a gold coin about yay big, right? And one of the characteristics of gold, well, it's durable, right? And also it's relatively malleable. You can cut it fairly easily. And so what would happen is if you wanted to buy something with your peso, but what you're buying doesn't cost you an entire peso, what you can do is they would literally cut the peso into eighths, just like a pizza, right? You had this peso, you cut it up into 8 little wedges, and that would be an eighth of a peso, or what you call a piece of 8, right? And that piece, so if you watch, any Pirates of the Caribbean, they probably refer to pieces of 8. Well, that was an eighth of a peso, right? And then if you had two pieces of 8, you had 2 bits. Well, that would be a quarter. And even to this day, there's some of our older folks still refer to a quarter in terms of it being 2 bits, right? Either way, for the dollar, of course, is dividable into. Now, what you do is you have coins that represent certain divisions of the currency. In this case, of course, you know that a dollar can be divided up into 100ths, right? And this 100th is equal to a penny, or a cent is the more technical term. Actually, believe it or not, the dollar is actually divisible into thousandths. And actually, this thousandths is what you would call a mil. And that'll be important to you when you buy your own house and you are paying property taxes. Your property taxes are actually calculated according to what we call millage, to the thousandths of the dollar. So when they raise your property rate 5 mils, what they're saying is they're raising your property tax by 5 1,000ths of a dollar. which doesn't sound like much, but when you're sitting on a $300,000 house, that actually adds up to something, right? So anyway, it's divisible, and you need to know those divisibles. And another characteristic is that it's a limited supply. And usually what you have is you have one entity whose job it is to supply the currency. In the United States, it's the Federal Reserve, and when it comes to coins, it's the Federal Reserve is for paper currency, soft currency, and when it comes to coins, it's the Treasury. The Treasury gets to put out the number of coins that it wants to put out. It's a limited supply, and of course, a great deal of energy and effort is put into making sure that you can't counterfeit and add to the supply more than is supposed to be there, because control. If you saw my the video on the monetary base and what's going on in the economy, you know that it's kind of a balancing act. You want to have the amount of money in your monetary base, right? The total amount of money in your market should be enough so that everybody can get their hands on some, but not so much that it's really not so hard to get it, right? If I dumped thousands of Andosha bucks into the classroom, and everybody was able to get 200 Andosha bucks, well then $100 for an A is 100 Andosha bucks for an A is really no big deal. Everybody can get that, right? It's not hard. So that means that I then have to say, oh well, guys, instead of $100 for an A, I'm now going to charge $200 or $250 for an A. Well, what is that? Well, that's called inflation, right? When there's too much of the money in the marketplace, that's inflation, right? All right, so then the next thing that we want to talk about with regard to money and currency is, what is it for? What exactly do we do? I mean, why should this matter? Why should this piece of paper translate into a grade, right? Or why should you be able to take $1 and go to the store and get a candy bar for it, right? Why does that piece of paper translate into an exchange for a candy bar? Or why can I take 10,000 of those pieces of paper and go and drive off of a car lot with a brand new car, right? Why does that work? How does that happen? And why is it that a piece of paper that has a 1 on it is worth less than a piece of paper that just has a 10 on it, right? That putting that 0 means that it's 10 times more valuable? Why? It's the same piece of paper, same amount of ink is made to print on that piece of paper. This paper's the same size. Why would it be more valuable, right? And the bottom line is that, again, like I said with the Andosha buck, is that you have an authority, in our case a state, a government, that says that's what this value is, right? And what they're able to do is they're able to use that and decide that, hey, this is actually what we call a medium of exchange. It's a medium of exchange. So again, kind of comparing this to the old barter system where you had to take your goat and exchange it for a barrel to get a satchel. All right, that's really, really complicated. Why don't we just have one thing that everybody accepts as valuable that you can use as a medium of exchange so that you now don't have to waste your time going to the barrel maker, right? So one of the elements of this then is that it's acceptable to all parties. Acceptable to all parties. Everybody recognizes that this Andosha buck is valuable. So everybody in your class will say, hey, yes, this Andosha buck is valuable, right? Or everybody in the world will recognize that $1 is valuable, that I can use this dollar to get something that I need, right? And with regard to the dollar is really, really important because the dollar is what we call a reserve currency. In other words, it has global value. Everyone around the world recognizes that the dollar can be exchanged for goods and services. So again, even though I was in China, and the Chinese don't even really necessarily like us economically speaking, but the dollar does have spending value in China, right? There's some other examples of reserve currency. Of course, the dollar is the reserve currency. If you're going to purchase things in the international scene, it's usually done in dollars. To a certain extent, euros also work, yen, Japanese currency work, and now increasingly because of the economic power of China, you have what's called the renminbi, the Chinese yen, yuan. Is becoming kind of a global currency, right? So that's one of the characteristics of dollars. It's a medium of exchange that everybody accepts as being valuable, so everybody will accept the exchange, right? If you went to the tanner with your goat, and the tanner didn't need goat milk, didn't need cheese, he doesn't want to do business with you. But if you go with something that everybody sees as having value, then he'll make that exchange. So gold serves this purpose, right? For whatever reason, especially in European society, gold had value. Everybody would accept gold. If you went to the tanner with a gold coin, he'd give you what you wanted, right? It was a medium of exchange. These mediums of exchange, by the way, are arbitrary. It's negotiated socially. It's socially constructed. Right, so once upon a time, for instance, if you go into the northeastern Americas, before Europeans got there, the Native Americans there used a particular currency called wampum, and this wampum was basically ribbons of beaded ribbons, basically, and this wampum became a medium of exchange. Everybody would accept it. And therefore, if I remember correctly, I believe it was the Pequots, I believe, are the ones that controlled the wampum trade, right? They made the wampum, and then everybody wanted this wampum. It was a representative of wealth. Totally arbitrary, right? These folks just decided that was a valuable thing, just like gold. Gold in and of itself is a nice shiny metal, but whatever. And in fact, the Inca, they used it to decorate their buildings, but it wasn't anything that they considered to be particularly valuable other than as a decorative metal. And but Europeans saw this gold, and they were like, "Oh, we got to have that gold." So, give them some gold, whatever, right? It was no big deal. So these medium of exchanges, they're arbitrary. There's no one rationale. There's no reason why gold has to be a medium of exchange and not dollars. Right? It's just that's what we see as being valuable. Another thing that money does is is a measure of value. Right? If everybody's using a different measure of value, it's going to be very difficult to do business in a marketplace, right? How valuable is that goat to the tanner? Not particularly valuable. But maybe that goat is somewhat valuable to the cooper, and, well, now that barrel to you is not particularly valuable, except you need a barrel in order to get the satchel that you need. It's really, really confusing. It's a hard way of doing this, but if you just have one measure of value, then it's much easier to do business. You can go and buy a house and know, hey, this house is valued at $250,000. Are you willing to pay $250,000 for this house? Yes, no. It's easy, right? It's not like, hey, this house is worth 200 tons of potatoes. Are you willing to give me 200 tons of potatoes? Well, I don't have 200 tons of potatoes, but I do have, 12 cows. All right, well, now I have to figure out what potatoes are related to cows. It's too complicated, right? By using currency, we use that as a measure of value. Another thing that it is a measure of value of is, of course, a measure of value of labor, right? Otherwise, it's very difficult to say, hey, this is the job I need to have done. It's worth $10 an hour. Are you willing to do this job for $10 an hour? Yes, no, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, right? So it becomes a relatively efficient measure of value. Another thing that money is a store of value. All right, it's a store of value. In other words, if you have $1, you can feel pretty safe that if you put that dollar under your mattress and find that dollar 20 years from now, it's probably going to have some value. Now, maybe not as much value as it does today, but it'll have some value, right? Now that becomes a problem when you're dealing with currencies that are not as stable as the dollar, right? Because then that currency may not have value in 20 years, right? It may not exist in 20 years for some countries that are just getting started. That was also true for the United States when it was first getting started. But with currency like dollars, euros, yen, renminbi, these major currencies, they're going to have value. You can take that money, you can store it, you can put it in a bank, you can take it out. You have a pretty good idea that the money that you save up today is going to be of value down the road. So now you have an incentive to actually save your money and use that money for strategically. You can make assumptions about the value of that money, and you can then plan for your future. If money doesn't store value, and right, in other words, if the money just goes up and down and you can't make any predictions, then it's really not a particularly efficient way of making plans for your future. You can't make plans of, well, I'm going to save up my money so I can buy a car down the road, because you don't know if that money is actually going to be able to buy that car. Think in terms of, well, I want to save up my money and invest so that I can retire when I get old. If the money isn't a store of value, you won't be able to do that. So anyway, these are the major characteristics, the major functions of money. So we've covered the characteristics of money, and we've covered the functions of money, and that's money. And hopefully you have a better understanding of just exactly what money is in a marketplace. It's not as concrete as we think, but it does make sense when you actually start applying the principles. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and we'll talk to you later.